Thanks for joining us online today. If you've been impacted by this ministry and have a story to share of how God is working in your life, we would love to hear it. Send an email to amen@anchorpoint.tv. Also, you can help bring messages just like this one to others who need to hear the hope and the love of Jesus by investing today at anchorpoint.tv/give. Now, we hope you enjoy today's message.
Hey, before you're seated, stay standing for a moment. I want you to greet somebody around you, but I'll give you three things you can say. You can say, go Chiefs, you can say, go 49ers, or you can say, who cares about football? You go ahead, high five somebody. Go Chiefs, go 49ers, or who cares about football? I want to take a minute and welcome our online audience. If you are a football fan, drop in the comments who you're pulling for today. Let us know. And if you're pulling for Satan's team, the San Francisco 49ers, we're glad that you're watching. Can we welcome our online audience as well? Yeah. Go Chiefs if you're wondering who I'm pulling for. Old Patty Mahomes, boy, I pull for him and Andy Reid. So, man, we're glad you're here today. My name is Todd, and along with my sweet wife Avery, we get the incredible privilege to serve as lead pastors here. And man, we just love what God's doing. We had our Super Bowl swap service last night. Man, we had a packed house on a Saturday night. We normally have a Sunday night service, but just so our team could kind of hang out and have some community and fellowship, we just kind of moved that to Saturday nights, had an incredible service with them. And man, we're believing today for great things as we wrap up this series called From Here to There. It's been an incredible series and season in our church. I hope you're learning and growing with us, because I feel like this is something that I've needed more than anybody else in the room. So I want to encourage you to grab your message notes and follow along. And we got a lot of stuff we'll let you know about at the end of service, but I have asked Pastor Ryan to come and share with us today, help us wrap this series up, maybe put a nice little bow on it for us and leave us better than we left us. Pastor Ryan's been a part of our church. He was actually the first hire I made as pastor. He's been around 9 years. He's really like a spiritual son to me, so I always love to hear him communicate. So when you tell him and you tell me how good he is and how much better he is than me, hey, man, I'm all for that, because, man, I look at him as, I think a lot of you in this room, we've got to see him grow and mature in the Lord, and he is an excellent communicator. So I want you to put your hands together for Pastor Ryan Koloski. Love you, man.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, if I haven't got to meet you, my name is Ryan. I do get to be the youth pastor here. And I'm honored to be with you to, like Pastor Todd said, wrap up this series that we have been in. This will be week number 5 that we've been in this series, From Here to There. And hopefully you've made some progress on your journey as well, from where you are to maybe a little bit further and closer to where you want to be. And I encourage you, listen, if you've missed any week of this series, go back and watch. There's no shortage of ways you can do that. We got a podcast. We have our website. You can find the service there. On Facebook, which we're streaming right now, this service. You can watch the whole service from beginning to end. Go catch up. Go find the week that you missed, because you will definitely want to do that. And so here's the thing. We've been on this journey with the Israelites from their exodus, so to speak. They're leaving out of Egypt into the promise that God is going to take them to. And on week 1, we sort of saw that God had this, he did these mighty acts to compel Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. And then in week 2, we saw that God didn't take the Israelites on the easy path to the promised land. He took them on the right path to the promised land, and how sometimes God will take you on the right path instead of the easy one, because he's going to build you along the way. And then in week 3, we saw God make a way where there seemed to be no way, and he can do the same thing in your life today. And then last week, probably my favorite week, we learned that on our journey from here to there, our biggest enemy is our enemy. I love that thought. I love that statement. Our biggest enemy is our enemy. And I don't know about you, but the biggest obstacle in my life for being used in opportunities of God is myself. We have a spiritual enemy, don't get me wrong, but my biggest obstacle is really myself. I'm my own worst enemy sometimes. And so if you missed any of those, go back and watch them. But since we're wrapping it up today, surely, we got to wrap this thing up nice and pretty, put a little bow on it. The Israelites go into the promised land, and everything is just honky-dory, right? No, you'll be in for a surprise today. We're going to actually look at a little in-between moment in the journey of the Israelites that I really think can benefit us in such a great way. I couldn't end this thing the way it should be ended, okay, nice and pretty with a fairy tale ending and they live happily ever after. I really wanted to dig into something that I think can really help us even more than that. And I want to kind of start it out by giving us the title of today's message. So I want you to look to your neighbor, the one, whether they're a Chiefs fan or 49ers, it's okay. Set that aside for a second and just look at them and tell them the title of today's message. Look at your neighbor, say, neighbor. Come on, say, neighbor. Begin with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. Has anybody ever heard that statement before? Begin with the end in mind, right? Anybody recognize where it came from? Anybody know? Anybody? No, close, right? It's actually from an author by the name of Stephen R. Covey. He wrote the very famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the most popular books of our generation. And the second habit of highly effective people is begin with the end in mind. We're good at starting stuff, aren't we? Yeah. We start a lot of stuff. We don't finish a lot of it, though, do we? And we can save ourselves a lot of trouble. We can save ourselves a lot of time if we just begin with the end in mind. But here's what I want to do. I want to leave the title here for just a second. Usually we expound on it, kind of talk about it. I want to leave it here because I want to come back to it. I want to wrap it and bring it full circle today. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the title here, and I want to get us all on the same page, moving in the same direction. And I want you to see how much you have in common with the person sitting next to you. I want to ask you a question. I want you to think hard about this. Think deep. All across your life, in every aspect and area and facet of your being, maybe work, relationships, think real deep now. Have you ever, think hard, been frustrated? Anybody? Raise your hand if you've been frustrated before. How many of you have been frustrated today? Raise your hand. How many of you are frustrated every day? Raise your hand. Okay, it's okay. We're in church. This is a safe place. Life is full of frustrations, isn't it? Life is full of frustrations. Slow internet. It's frustrating. Right? You can tell me, I can meet you and you can be like, I'm a man of character. I'm a woman of character and integrity and honor. I live by conviction. But I can find out real quick what you're made of. If I hand you a phone or a computer that has a slow internet connection, you'd be hitting it, right? It just frustrates you. I don't know what it is. Slow internet. Do you know what else is slow that frustrates me? Slow drivers. Oh, man. Here, and listen, here's the thing. Snowbirds, God bless you. I love you. You got a blue tag. You've earned it. Okay? Nobody can tell you how to drive. You're a grown man. You're a grown woman. And honestly, I don't care if you drive slow. Doesn't bother me a bit. You can drive 20 miles an hour on Highway 59. Just do it in the right-hand lane. I shouldn't have to pass you in the right-hand lane. That's what the left-hand lane is for. All right? Slow things can really frustrate us. And I would ask you, like, what frustrates you, but that's really the nature of frustration, isn't it? That it's so subjective. Something that frustrates you could not make a bit of difference to the person sitting next to you. They could care less about it, but it frustrates you to the core every time, right? Frustrations are so subjective. And I was doing a little research in preparation for this message, and I wanted to know, like, what really frustrated people. Were there common threads? What were some things that maybe I could relate to that frustrated people? And I got to searching, and I found a Reddit thread. And Reddit is just like a website or like social media site that has all these different categories that you can kind of follow called subreddits or whatever. And I came across this thread on Reddit where somebody simply asked this very simple, very straightforward question. What frustrates you the most about modern day life? And I thought, whoa, this is going to be good. And so I got myself a hot cup of coffee and I started sipping on it and scrolling, man. And I just scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. And a few of them stood out to me. I figured I should share them with you. I want you to see what really frustrates people about modern day life. The first one that I came across that I thought I should share with you was that somebody just wrote, the high cost of living. You mean to tell me, in the wide world that we live in, the one thing that frustrates you the most is the high cost of living. Stuff costs too much. The cost of living is too high, so you want the cost of living to go down. Well, may I tell you today and reveal to you that if the cost of living went down, so would your salary. That's just kind of how it works. We don't live in a dystopian society where all of a sudden the cost of living just plummets and you get to keep your salary in the same place. It just doesn't work like that. I thought that was interesting. Another one. Somebody wrote, being able to contact me whenever. Did anybody ever get frustrated by that one? People can just contact you whenever. Doesn't matter. They can contact you anytime they want. We walk around with these devices in our pockets that people can get a hold of us at any time. And I read that and I thought it was ridiculous. Because nobody is making you keep this device in your pocket. So I read that and I thought, being able to contact me whenever, that one can be fixed easily. There we go. Problem solved. Frustration gone. Right? Nobody's making you keep that thing in your pocket. You can just get rid of it. Super simple and easy. Another one I thought I would share with you. I thought was pretty funny. Somebody wrote, the one thing that frustrates them the most about modern day life, the abundance of everything. Really? Really? You're going to pick that pony and ride that one. Okay. Wait, you mean to tell me you want to be able to access less? You mean to tell me you want less opportunity available to you? People make millions of dollars a year recording videos on their phone and posting them to the internet. You can do anything nowadays. You mean to tell me you want less opportunity available to you? I thought it was ridiculous. And then I began to read a little bit more and they explained their stance on the subject. They said, the abundance of everything practically makes its way into all aspects of life and makes decision-making quite difficult. And I thought, they're not wrong. And I'll be honest with you, I have my frustrations too. I'm not going to stand up here and say you shouldn't be frustrated. I'm not frustrated. Everything just rolls off the shoulders so easily. I don't get worked up about anything. I have my frustrations. And so as I read this, I began to agree with it because, you know, one thing that really frustrates me, you want to know, is trying to pick where you want to eat with your spouse. Mm-hmm. And I guess since there's such an abundance of food available to us, all you ladies can't decide where you want to eat. And the guy said, thank you. Hey, honey, where you want to eat? Oh, I don't really care. Well, let's just run by Popeyes real quick. Ew, that's nasty. Okay, let's do Dairy Queen. Ew, I don't like that. Well, then where do you want to eat? Oh, I don't really care. It doesn't matter. Apparently, it does. You know what else frustrates me? People at stores who enter through the exit doors. Every time it happens, I'm walking out the store with my buggy. I am exiting through the doors that are clearly marked exit. And somebody inevitably enters through the doors that are marked exit. And inevitably, we get in each other's way. And so I stop. I don't say it out loud because I'm more Christian than that. But I think in my head, I hope you're ready to stand here until you die because I am not moving. Exit. I got a buggy, you don't. Y'all don't act all holy. First time y'all came in this church, you're like, where's the auditorium at? It's like, well, it's the doors that have auditorium above them. You know what? I want to know something else that frustrates me? 1,000 questions before I got to pump gas. I will be a lifetime customer of the first gas station that I can find. I don't care how many miles out of the way I got to go, where I could just swipe my card, pick my octane, pump my gas. Simple. I don't want a car wash. I don't want to watch a commercial or a YouTube video on the gas pump. Don't care. All right? I just want to pump my gas and go. Speaking of questions, this one really gets me. 1,000 questions while I'm checking out and paying for my stuff at the store. Like, it's crazy. This has gotten so much more complicated. So much more complicated. Insert card. Credit or debit. You should be able to tell by the card. Like, it has it on it. Is this the correct amount? Yes, she just said it, the lady. Would you like to donate $1? No, because I don't get credit for it. You do. Chip error. Oh, my goodness. You got to pull it out. Try swiping. You swipe it. Swiping not allowed. Insert chip. Here we go again. Insert the chip. Credit or debit. We just went over this. Would you like cash back? No, nobody carries cash anymore. Type a PIN number, thankfully. Please wait. No problem. I've been here 4 hours already. Another 20 minutes isn't going to hurt. And then you get, when a successful transaction happens, you get the, you're like pulling it out. You're like, oh, do you think the cops are coming or something? It's like the sound they should use whenever you're using a stolen credit card and they catch you, not when it's a successful transaction, you know? It's crazy. And listen, I have my frustrations, and you have yours. And inevitably, listen, we encounter little frustrations throughout each and every day. It's normal, okay? I have my frustrations, you have yours. It's normal. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have frustrations, but what I would really want to speak to today is how we manage them, how we deal with them, how we dissipate them, how we don't allow them to overwhelm us, because it can cost us so much. And that's why I want to speak to the story that we're talking about today in Numbers chapter 20. We'll be there in a second. You can camp out there. It's on your notes. We'll throw it on the screens here in just a second. But I want to get us all moving in the same direction, because frustration is so subjective, right? You may not be bothered by the 1,000 questions at the chip reader, okay? You may not be bothered about people entering through the exit doors. So frustrations are just so subjective. So frustrations can mean different things to different people, but I want to give us a common definition to get us all moving in the same direction, okay? And it's on your outlines right there. We'll throw it on the screens. Simply this: frustration is simply an emotion that occurs in situations. So now we're all included, right? We all have emotions. We're all in situations. An emotion that occurs in situations where a person is what? Blocked from reaching a desired outcome. The outcome I want is to buy my Mountain Dew and chips. I have to answer 10,000 questions before I do it. That's blocking me from the desired outcome I want. Just get out the store. I just want to pump my gas. I just want to exit through the doors clearly marked. I just want to pick somewhere so we can eat. I'm about to starve to death and die because we can't decide. That's what I'm blocked from that. And as a matter of fact, the word frustration comes from the Latin word frustra, which just means obstruction, right? So obstructions cause frustrations. Obstructions cause frustrations. In the same ways that we're susceptible to frustrations in everyday life, we're also susceptible to frustrations in our faith. Like maybe God didn't answer a prayer like you thought he should have. But what you didn't see was the pain that would accompany the provision that you thought you needed. Maybe God didn't answer your prayer when you thought he should have, but what you didn't see was God was taking you the right way instead of the short way, because he wants to build your character, not just your competence. Right. Maybe you didn't get the break even though you've been honoring God and you thought you deserved it, but what you didn't see is God preparing something much better for you in the future than what you wanted right now. Right? And we get frustrated in these situations. But also, too, if we're being real, your frustrations from everyday life, with your kids, with your spouse, with your work, with whatever, can also bleed over into our faith as well. And we can place those frustrations and we can place those characteristics on God and on our relationship with him, and it can begin to affect our relationship with Jesus. And so all of you just agreed that you get frustrated. We all get frustrated. And so frustration, though, is so low-key and it's so easy to gloss over and miss the gravity and the effect that it can have on our life. Because let me ask you another question. Have you ever let frustration affect how you act? And frustration can do that. It can affect your actions. It can affect, and if it can affect your actions, it can affect your outcomes. Maybe your frustration caused you to say something that you later regretted. Maybe your frustration caused you to act in a way that you wish you would not have. And built up frustration can quickly lead to destruction. Built up frustration can quickly lead to destruction. And here's what I learned today, and I learned this from Dr. Phil. That frustration always shows itself in the form of anger. That built up frustrations will eventually build up to the point where they come out and show themselves in the form of anger. That's why I always say that an anger issue is really just a maturity issue. I'm a youth pastor, okay, so I deal with a lot of teenagers. And anytime I see a teenager that has anger issues, it's really just a maturity issue because they don't know how to deal with and manage their frustrations efficiently. And it's just a maturity issue. Those frustrations build up until they come flying out in the form of anger. But, here's what I want to do today. Here's what I want us to see today. That we don't have to let frustrations affect how we act. That if we can learn to deal with, diffuse, and manage our frustrations in a healthy way, I believe we can avoid some major pitfalls on our journey from here to there. And so here's what I want to do. This little stop along the way in the story of the Israelites. Moses, our main character for the most of the series, really experiences the same thing that you and I experience on an everyday basis. But Moses makes a mistake that I really want to help you avoid today. Because I think if we're not careful on our journey from here to there, it's a long journey. And on our journey from here to there, we can allow frustrations to build up to the point where it can begin to cost us heavily. And our frustrations can overwhelm us and cause regret and cause pain. And I don't want you to do that. And we're going to learn from Moses today to not make the same mistake that he made. So Numbers chapter 20, starting in verse 1, we're going to read about 10 or 12 verses of Scripture. We're just going to kind of break it down as we go because I really want to give us some insight. I really want us to dig into the text and see what God's speaking to us through it this morning. Numbers chapter 20, verse 1. It'll be on the screens. It's on your outline. Read the underlined words with me when we get to them. Verse number 1, in the first month, the whole Israelite community arrived in the desert of Zin, and they stayed at Kadesh. And there Miriam died and was buried. That's Moses' sister, okay? Verse number 2, now there was no water for the community, and the people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. They quarreled with Moses and said, if only we had died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord. Why did you bring the Lord's community into this wilderness, that we and our livestock should die here? Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to this terrible place? How familiar does this sound? We've heard this every week in our series, and this is all they do. The Israelites do this over and over and over again throughout the book of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. The whole 40 years they're in the wilderness, all they do is whine. They just whine. Have you ever done something for somebody and they didn't appreciate it? Yeah. Like Moses literally delivered them through. God used Moses to deliver them from slavery. They were slaves, not figuratively, literally, like chains on wrist, forced labor slaves. Like their parents were slaves, grandparents were slaves, great-grandparents were slaves. And you may notice here in the text, this is the second generation to wander in the wilderness. They said, if only we had died when our brothers did. That a majority of the Israelites that had walked out and stepped out of Egypt on that day have now died. And this is like the next generation that's roaming and wandering in the wilderness because they just can't stop whining about it. Right? It was the sons and daughters for the most part. And it's just over and over and over again. It's a perfect situation for frustration. Don't your kids drive you insane when they ask you the same thing over and over again? Pastor Matt, he shared last week in our pre-service huddle, he shared how his son's in the stage now where he just like asks the same thing over and over again. No matter what answer he gets, he just, Dad, can I have a banana? No, buddy, no, we're about to eat supper soon, but Dad, my belly needs a banana. No, your belly doesn't. You're not gonna, not a banana, not right now. Dad, I really need a banana. No, you don't. You're not gonna get a banana. And just keeps asking. Ava's in the same stage right now. She's in the same stage. My daughter's 3.5, and she prefaces every statement she makes with either, hey, Mom, or hey, Dad. For example, in the morning, we get up. She says, hey, Dad. Yes, honey. Can I have some Cheerios for breakfast? Yes, you can. Hey, Dad. Yes, honey. Will you put some milk in my Cheerios for me? Yes, I will. Hey, Dad. Yes, honey. Can I have some milk in a cup, please? Absolutely, sweetheart. Hey, Dad. Yes, honey. Can you put a straw in my cup with the milk? Yes, I can. Hey, Dad. What is it, sweetheart? Can you put the Cheerios in the living room so I can watch PJ Masks while I eat them? Yes, I sure can. Hey, Dad, hold on a second. It's so persistent. Like, you don't have to say, hey, Dad, every time you ask me something. Hey, Dad, okay. She just still does it. And it's the perfect situation for frustration, this repetitive, just over and over and over again, persistence. Right, so they're complaining, they're whining. Why did you bring us here? Why did you do this to us, Moses? We didn't want this. We were fine. Right, and they keep going on. Next verse. They say, this place, it has no grain to make organic bread or fig Newtons or grapes or that Palm brand pomegranate juice that we like so much. And there's certainly no Fiji water to drink. They have a really specific grocery list, don't they? Like, you ain't going to Walmart to get this stuff. You got to go to Publix. You know? Verse number 6, Moses and Aaron went from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell face down and said, Lord, you're going to do something about your people. Doesn't your spouse do this to you whenever your kids are acting up? My wife says, Ryan, you need to talk to your daughter. I'm like, all right. They went from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting, fell face down, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And then verse number 7, I want to stay for a second. Then the Lord said to Moses, and God's about to give Moses an answer. He's about to speak to him. And I want you to pay very close attention to what God says. He gives him very specific instructions. They're not complicated. They're simple. Moses said, God, we need you. We need your help. We need your provision. We need you to move. We need you to do what only you can do. And God's about to speak and tell Moses what his next step is. The Lord said to Moses, verse 8, take the staff, and you and your brother Aaron gather the assembly together. Then what? Speak to that what? Rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. You will bring water out of the rock for the community so that they and their livestock can drink. Verse number 9, so Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence, and then what? Just as he commanded him. So everything is good up until this point. That we've been here before, right? Moses is leading the Israelites on their journey to the promised land. They're in the desert, so water is pretty important. Valid argument. They complain, which is about the only thing that they're good at. But Moses, it's not the first time Moses has experienced it, so he goes to the Lord and says, Lord, we need a miracle. God tells him to grab the staff and speak to the rock. So Moses grabs the staff, and him and Aaron leave the altar. But something transpires between the altar and the assembly of people. Something happens. Something changes between the tent and the rock. And this is where I think Moses makes a big mistake. A mistake I want to help you avoid at all costs. Because Moses kind of loses sight of what matters and allows his frustration to get the best of him. If you like extra notes, you can write this down. Listen, frustration will make you lose sight of what matters. Frustration will make you lose sight of what matters. And losing sight of what matters will always lead to frustration. I can get frustrated at someone else I can get frustrated at my daughter for breaking a plate or a cup, accidentally, of course. But whenever I do it, I'm just like, oops, where's the broom? You ever got onto your kids for doing something, but if you did it, it wouldn't be that big of a deal? It's because we lose sight of what really, because in the grand scheme of things, the cup, the plate, the whatever, doesn't really matter that much. Let's see how it affects Moses. Verse number 10. He and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock. And Moses said to them, listen, you rebels, must we bring water out of this rock? And then Moses raised his arm and struck the rock twice with his staff, and water gushed out. The community and their livestock drank. It seems like everything's okay. The water is flowing, right? But can I tell you, just because the water is flowing doesn't mean everything's all right. Just because the water is flowing doesn't mean everything's all right. Some of you are here today and the water's flowing. But just because the water's flowing, it doesn't mean things are all right. You have a deep hurt or a pain or a hang up or a stronghold, and God has called you out on it, and he's told you to give it to him or confess it to someone else, but instead you try to do it on your own power. And it's worked so far, the water is flowing, but I can tell you everything is not all right. One of the biggest mistakes that we can make is we try and do it our way and still get God's blessing on it. We try and fix it. We try and problem solve and do it our way and expect God to bless it in the process. And God told Moses to take the staff and speak to the rock. Moses took the staff and spoke to the people instead. And he did it because he was frustrated. He did it because he was angry. And it's so tempting to do it our way when we're frustrated. It's so tempting to do it our way because it feels better. It may feel better in the moment, but I promise you it will not change the situation. And it could end up costing you more than you realize. So here's how we end our story today. Verse 12, the last verse we're going to read in this series, the last verse of Scripture that we're going to have in our story, in our journey from here to there. And this is how we're going to leave it. This is how we're going to end it. And I want you to see the gravity of what's so easy to gloss over. I want you to see the gravity of what can make such a difference in our life if we don't get a handle on frustration. Verse number 12. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you what? Will not. Wow. You will not bring this community into the land that I give them. God still fulfills his promise. But evidently Moses, in his frustration with the people, thought that he was the performer of the miracle rather than just God's instrument. And this is a common error when we allow our frustration to get the best of us, thinking that we need to be manufacturers of a miracle rather than simply distributors of it. And the lesson is so clear. Listen, God's grace is never a grounds for presumption, to go about it our own way and expect God to bless it. Listen, our frustration can start to cause destruction, and that destruction can get to a point of disobedience, and that disobedience can really disqualify us, not from salvation itself, but from the opportunities to be used in the ongoing purposes of God. Moses' salvation, he was not denied that. It didn't change God's love for him. It didn't change God's grace for him. It didn't change God's mercy for him. But his frustration got so out of hand that it led to a disobedience that disqualified him from being used in the ongoing purposes of God, from seeing the promise itself fulfilled. So here's what I want you to understand today. Every time you said it, you bump up against frustration all the time. By your own admission, me too. Every single day, frustration after frustration after frustration, small things, big things, regular life things, spiritual things, things in our faith, it doesn't matter. We're bumping up against frustration. And if we don't learn to deal with it, if we don't learn to dissipate it, if we don't learn to manage it, if we don't learn to get a handle on it, here's what I want you to understand. Anytime that happens, here's what I want to ring clear as a bell in your conscience. It's a single point that we have for today. I want you to write this down. Frustration can cause you to forfeit your future. It cost Moses his. And if you read on, and if you want to finish the story and wrap it up and put a nice bow on it, if you read on, God still works through Moses. He goes on for another couple years. God still speaks to him. God still gives him grace and mercy and provision. But Moses never sees the promise. He never gets to see the promise. The one thing, Moses was handpicked for this mission. We saw that. If you read back, Moses was picked out of the very river he was supposed to be drowned in. And he was supernaturally placed in the Pharaoh's palace, the Pharaoh of Egypt, and raised and taught and then handpicked for this assignment to lead God's people out of slavery and into his promise. But frustration had gotten such a hold on him that he allowed it to cost him the very purpose of seeing God's promise fulfilled. If we don't learn to properly deal with our frustrations, it can end up costing you the dream that God has for you. That's what From Here to There is all about, really. Really within a context. On this side of eternity, there is no promised land. The promised land is heaven. We get to hold on to that hope. But on this side of eternity, there, I would say that there is a life of fulfillment, a life of purpose, a life of meaning, a life of impact, a life of influence for the kingdom of God. That's what there is on this side of eternity. And that's a dream that we should always pursue. That's a promise we should always run after. But we're so afraid that failure is going to keep us from getting there. But I'm here to tell you today, frustration has killed more dreams than failure ever will. See, failure will give you determination, but frustration unchecked will lead to disobedience. And frustration can cause us to forfeit our future. So what do? What does this look like in your life? From teenager to seasoned follower of Jesus. What does it look like for you? What does this look like in your work when you go back tomorrow? What does this look like in your home? What does this look like when you gather with family? Everybody knows nobody can frustrate you like family. What does it look like? What do you do with it? And on Monday, as I was talking to Pastor Todd about this message and I was thinking about the angle that I really wanted to take and what the text was saying, what God was revealing to me, and I was kind of second guessing the idea of frustration. It wasn't making a lot of sense to me at the time. And he said, no, you should really stick with that. I really think you should speak to the idea of frustration. Everyone deals with it. He says, I would like to know what the cure is for frustration. And I thought, man, that would be awesome. As I prayed over this message, I began to think, man, it would be great, if we could look into this text and see the mistake that Moses made and learn from it and really figure out what the cure for frustration is. God would give us this big revelation. The more I developed this, the more that God really showed me that there isn't a cure for frustration. You're not going to fully eliminate frustration from your life. As much as I want there to be, as much as you want there to be, there isn't a cure. Life is going to bring frustration here and there. Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble. I don't know about you, but to me, the word trouble sounds like frustration. He said, you're going to have it. But if we could just learn to manage it, we can learn to healthily deal with it, it can make a world of difference. And here's what the key is. I think the key to dealing with our frustration, to managing it, to make sure it doesn't overtake us and start to cause destruction and disobedience is so simple. God, it's so simple. I love it. It's one word: perspective. Begin with the end in mind. Just like we talked about at the beginning, and we're thinking about it from the beginning. See, Moses could have minimized his frustration if he would have kept his perspective on the promise of God. If he would have kept his perspective on the promise that God had for him, he could have minimized his frustration and realized that these little things really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, that God has something so much bigger and so much better and so much more planned for you, so much more than you think you can know. They were about to walk into a promise that was bigger than anything they could ever dream. But Moses let frustration in the moment take his perspective off of God's promise. Proper perspective will help you battle frustration. Listen to me, church. Your perspective plays a big role. How you see things determines how you experience things. They were going into a promise that was bigger than anything, but they allowed frustration. Moses allowed frustration to cause him to forfeit his future. So what does it look like for you? Here's how I just want to end this service. I just want you to maybe pray a prayer. Ask that question. Do some self-evaluation. So if you will, just bow your head and close your eyes real quick. And I just want you to start by saying a simple prayer. Just say, God, where are my frustrations costing me the future that you have for me? Where have I let my frustrations overwhelm me? Where have I let my frustrations affect how I act? And how can I manage them? God, what I need to let go of and give to you? What I need to trust your power and your promise instead of my problem solving and my ways? God, help us to see supernaturally things that we haven't seen before. Areas of our life that we need to address. God, I pray that you would help us to see where we need to change and give us the strength to do it. In Jesus' name, amen.